everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we officially kick this off, I do want to point out to the audience that we welcome questions. Please post them in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. Type them in, and time permitting, we will get to those at the conclusion of today's fireside chat. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Stephen Saltzstein, Force Family Office's CEO.
Thank you, Callie. So we have a fantastic force for knowledge for you today about gene therapy. And, the story of gene therapy is fascinating. It is a kind of modern marvel in biotechnology. And with me today, we're very lucky to have Bill Maughan from Clear Street. Bill, just to begin with, if you don't mind, just give us like a minute on yourself, your background.
Sure. Yeah. So I did my PhD in biochemistry at Weill Cornell and Memorial Sloan Kettering, mostly working on RNA and the enzymes that break them and stick them back together. I joined the Wall Street side of the world in 2016, so going on 10 years almost now, and have been analyzing biotech and pharma stocks ever since then.
That's great. All right, and you have a very strong background. So. For those of us that don't have PhDs, at the simplest level, do you mind just telling people, what is gene therapy? How does it differ from other traditional pharmaceutical approaches or biologics?
Sure. Yeah. So essentially, when you think of most medicines, whether it be a pill, an injection, whatever, it's mostly just a whole bunch of one kind of molecule that you pump into your body, and it tweaks or blocks something that's happening already in your body. So if you take an aspirin, that can turn off, pain receptors. If you take chemotherapy, that changes the way your body is handling, DNA in your cells. But it's all essentially modulating what's already happening. A gene therapy. Oh, and by the way, it's temporary. Once that molecule flushes out of your system,
Right.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Gene therapy, on the other hand, it's theoretically one-time lifelong treatment. It actually goes in and puts a gene into your body so that your own DNA can continue making something therapeutic, whether that's replacing a gene that it happens to be mutated in the patient and putting a good copy in, or whether that's teaching your cell how to create something that is going to treat the disease, so we don't have to keep injecting the same protein, every month for the rest of your life. It's something your DNA is used to doing. It's essentially what your DNA does. There's 20 or 30,000 different genes, and we just add, one more in there, and with hopefully therapeutic effect.
So one thing you said was replacing a gene. So is that generally CRISPR?
No, so CRISPR goes in and fixes one specific stretch of your DNA. And that has its own a huge set of uses. Gene therapy, narrowly defined, is taking an entire full gene and finding the right spot in your DNA and sticking it in. So adding a full new gene.
Oh, okay, fine. So, what technological breakthroughs have happened to, make this a reality after, this has been around for decades.
Yeah. So it's been, I'll go into a little bit of a history lesson here. It's been a long time coming. So first time this was officially kind of put forward as something that we could do to treat diseases was 1962. It was in the 80s, they started doing it in mice. It was 1990 when they first put it into people. There was a 4-year-old whose essentially immune system didn't work, and it was because of one gene. So they put it back in. And that was kind of the start of a long kind of set of hard lessons on safety and efficacy. So safety, we all know what that means. Efficacy is essentially whether or not it works. So in these patients, they gave it in little doses over the course of a few infusions. It didn't work that well, but they did get benefit out of it.
What was the first? Do you know what the first disease they were going after with it?
I believe it was SCID, severe combined immunodeficiency, something like that. So that was 1990. By 1999, this was already it was at the top of a hype cycle. We were starting to dream the dream, and everybody's going to get this for all kinds of things. And then unfortunately in 1999, there was a patient death. And that hit the brakes on the whole field pretty hard. The doctor who was in charge of that, Jim Wilson, was kind of the forefront of gene therapy at the time. He took a massive step back. Everybody took a massive step back and realized that we need safer vectors. And by vector, I mean the little virus that delivers the gene where it needs to go. So he went back to the drawing board for about a decade, found safer vectors that are much less likely to damage the patient, came back out and founded a company called Regenix Bio. So with those vectors, I think the whole field said, okay, the frost came off the field a little bit, and they said, okay, now it's a lot more feasible. So more companies started popping up, and more diseases, more programs started kind of being pushed forward. And then finally by 2019, so only 6 years ago, the first gene therapy was approved. And that was for a disease called spinal muscular atrophy. It's called Zolgensma. Actually also uses one of Regenix's vectors. Novartis has that now. And it's basically to treat this disease that is fatal early in life. Babies and young children get this gene therapy, and that was the first commercially successful, regulatory successful gene therapy to hit the market. So, I guess with that lesson, I guess to sum it up, it's just been a whole long list of learnings about both how to increase efficacy. By the way, it's now given in one shot instead of leaked in or over multiple like it was in the early 90s. And figuring out how to do it safely, which is something we've figured out largely, although we'll talk about this later, it continues to spring up from time to time.
Right. Oh, so I didn't realize that Regenix was really responsible for kind of like modern gene therapy success. So
In a large part, yeah. But they used to just kind of license out their vectors. It's been more recent that they've started developing their own programs and treating patients and pushing towards actually marketable therapies
right.
owned by themselves and partners.
And just talking about the vectors a little bit more. So what were the vectors that were, had safety issues, and then like what vectors, viruses,
Yeah.
actually successfully delivered the drugs?
Yeah. So I guess to get into a little bit behind the mechanism and why we're talking about viruses, because I realize that might be a surprise to some people. Viruses just do this. Viruses pump their DNA into cells and integrate it into your DNA. Not all of them, but certain classes of them. Everybody's DNA has long stretches of genes that viruses dumped in there into one of their ancestors generations ago and left. So we figured out how to, and by the way viruses work is they're very simple. It's a protein on the outside and it's genetic material inside. So that virus, all it does, and it's very much like a computer virus, it hops into a cell, it uses the little genetic material inside to just make more copies of itself, burst out of the cell, destroy the cell. Who cares? We have tons more virus. We're great. So we realized that if we change that little genetic material inside the virus to something that's not programming more viruses, to something that is actually beneficial to the patient, we can use that little trick to put DNA into the patient stably. Unfortunately, your body hates viruses. Well, fortunately, your body hates viruses, but in this case, that's something we've had to get around. So I'm not all that familiar with the original sets of viruses that were being used because they're so long gone at this point. But the ones now are called adeno-associated viruses. That's the most common one. Some companies are using other ones, but AAVs for short, AAV 7, 8, and 9 are some of the more popular ones. Those are known to be pretty safe.
So in a way, gene therapy almost hastens evolution.
It does. It does. I will say though, the way that we're doing it now is not heritable. We're doing it in patients. It's not germline mutations. So if I
Right.
have Duchenne's muscular dystrophy,
Right.
I get treated with this. I have a kid. They don't get any of the disease because it's not in the sperm cells.
Right. Right. Yeah, fair enough. So we now have something like 40 approved gene therapies. So
Mhm.
so where are we on the adoption curve?
Yeah, so I think, by the way, that 40 is if you use a fairly broad definition. So for example, we're at a place where we can take cells out of the body, put gene therapies into the cell, and then put the cells back in. So um, we're right now, it's so hard to kind of describe because biopharma is so different from any other industry. So you look at, the internet comes and everybody can use it for all kinds of things. Electric vehicles have come along and you could theoretically see them replacing a large amount of of vehicles that are on the road. With gene therapy, there are very specific circumstances and sets of diseases where this is going to work. And each time it's going to be a haul. It's going to be a learning, and it's going to have to be proven in each disease. So I would say, to put it in perspective, the fact that there's now a handful on the market is a great start. If you look at gene therapy companies over the past 6 months, at least their stocks wise, there's been a lot of growing appreciation for it. Just as a basket, gene editing, gene therapy, there's been more appreciation for it. And I think we'll start to see it grow, but we've already been through, at least two very prominent hype cycles in, late 90s and then probably, 15 years ago. So I think we're at the part where it becomes, we know the numbers, right? Zolgensma's been on the market for 6 years. So it's no longer pie in the sky. This is going to do everything. It's this drug for this thing did this amount of revenue here. So um, while I think we're coming out of a little bit of a freeze where we realized that it's not going to cure everything immediately, obviously, over the past several years, and biotech generally has been like that. But I think we're probably past a lot of the very kind of bubbly, high excitement, pop and fade, and probably into a more kind of stock pickers era where, one, you can pick company by company, program by program, disease by disease on who's going to win. So it's just a lot more hopefully stable where we are now.
What diseases make the most sense for gene therapy?
Yeah, that's a really good point because a really good topic because if you look at we're not going to treat, at least not in the horizon, cancers with gene therapy, at least not broadly. We're not going to treat headaches with gene therapy. It's got to be severe. It's got to be serious because these things do still have safety risk to some extent. So it's got to be serious. Um, it's good if there's low unmet need. So, for example, hemophilia has gene therapies and they haven't been commercially successful. Part of that is we have factor replacement. So in hemophilia, you're missing a certain gene. So perfect idea for gene therapy, right? Except we can just kind of pump that in, like we can just give it. So it's not
Meaning it's not necessarily use a vector. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, it's not necessary to use a vector or alter your DNA. Of
Right.
course, there's treatment burden, and that's what everyone was kind of hoping on, was that patients wouldn't want to have to infuse themselves with factor 8 or factor 9 every,
Right.
several weeks or months.
Sure.
But there's a lot of competition there. So gene therapy works best in places where there's nothing else. Um, just because, again, there can be safety risks. So it's that doesn't matter if you're treating a patient who's if you're treating a newborn or someone a couple years old who's not going to make it to their teens. Like you'll take a 1 in 1,000 risk to save their life, but you're not going to do that if you can take a pill. Um, that's
Right.
where it makes the most
So
sense.
what is the total addressable market? How big is this? And how does it
Yeah,
compare, to other life sciences subsectors like this?
sure. Um, So actually, let me add one
Sure.
I guess market to that. So in addition to these rare diseases, ophthalmology. of all things. We're kind of random, right?
But is that because people hate to have a needle in the eye?
Yeah, so that's part of it. So
Yeah,
right now there are diseases where you have to get a needle in the eye every month or two. But the eye doesn't have the same safety issues as the rest of the body.
huh,
If you pump something into your veins, it's all over. If you pump it in your eye, it stays in your eye.
interesting.
So
Okay.
that makes ophthalmology another kind of prime area for gene therapies. Um, so in terms of TAM, well, we know some numbers. So Zolgensma, which treats SMA, which is only 450 to 500 patients in the US annually, and that's for the US. It is approved kind of globally, but they're doing $1.2 billion in revenue annually. So, that's one of many, many rare diseases that could be treated. And I'm kind of hesitant to put a number on TAM because that's when you can really kind of run away with it and get numbers that aren't realistic because the total addressable market is huge. It comes down to the total, I guess, reachable market. Um, so for example, we just talked about the therapy that you get injected in your eyeball every month or two versus a one-time treatment potentially. Um, that disease is a $14 billion annual disease. So, and that's with,
And there's 40 of them approved. I mean, to varying sizes.
sure, yeah, to varying sizes. So, for example, the hemophilia gene therapy is, I believe tens to maybe hundreds of millions a year, which is less than they'd expected. There's one for, there's a cell and gene therapy there's two of them for sickle cell disease that is a slower launch than normal or than was expected. So those will get, a bad launch will be under 100 million a year. A good launch is over a billion a year, and you can rack up several diseases. And there's plenty of people kind of trying to find their niche right now.
You mentioned Regenix, and I'm just curious, as an analyst, do you look at their value? How do you look at their valuation, both from a vector perspective and then a pipeline perspective?
Yeah, so it's essentially all pipeline.
It's all pipeline.
Yeah,
Why no valuation or why no value given to the vectors?
because I wouldn't say, I mean, there's not no value. They do have royalties that I believe, well, because there's so much more money in treating a disease than licensing out your vector. Because if you
Right.
license out your vector, you'll get a single digit royalty, maybe double digit royalty off that. But if you wholly own or 50-50 partner with something, it completely dwarfs any potential from licensing out the drug or licensing out the technology.
And let me ask you a question about ophthalmology, because I've heard that people say the eye is the only part of the brain that's outside of the body. And so and I could be way off here, but is there a blood-brain barrier situation as to, why it's logical for gene therapy or?
Yeah, exactly. So it's called immune privileged. The eye's immune privileged. So it doesn't have the same immune system as the rest of your body. It kind of when you get an injection into your eye, it'll stay there. So I've also heard that term that or the I guess saying that the eye is the only part of the outside of your brain, or brain that's outside of your body. Also heard that about the optic nerve. Your brain kind of stops at the back of your eye, and it's connected in there. But I mean, luckily for so many different reasons, the vitreous humor, the little liquid floating around the middle of your eyeball, is pretty well insulated from the rest of your body.
Let's talk about the practical aspects for having to build a successful biotechnology company in regards to where are we at with payer acceptance, manufacturing scale, regulatory. Can you just give me a summary of the
Yep.
practical aspects?
So payer acceptance has been great so far. I think that's on a couple reasons. First of all, these are effective in terms of lifelong treatment costs. Yes, for the Zolgensma, it's something like $3 million, but this is for someone that was going to be in and out of the ER and the ICU. That, and it's a life, it's a full life from a kid. So payers aren't going to be the person that says, no, that's too much. I'm not, I'm not going to do it. So payers have been good. It's also a very small amount of spend when you look at the entire market across of healthcare, right? If Zolgensma is doing $1.2 billion, well, the GLP-1s did about 40 billion last year. So they have bigger things to deal with in terms of figuring out how to pay for it than figuring out, how to pay for a
Right.
couple hundred kids' lives.
Yeah.
So that was on payers. Was regulatory, or what were the other two aspects you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, regulatory flexibility and
Yeah.
manufacturing scale.
Yes. Okay. So regulatory, it's there has been the FDA has been pretty turbulent in the past year, but the one thing that stayed steady is the messaging on the need for one-time, lifetime curative therapies. So, I mean, RFK held CRISPR personally in his stock portfolio. So, people have kind of seen the gene editing and gene therapy spaces as somewhat insulated. There's a high-profile case, this case called Baby KJ from a couple months ago, I think earlier this year, where they got a personalized CRISPR medicine, and that's been, it was a newborn I don't know exactly what their prognosis was, but this was this life-saving one-off treatment that this baby got. So regulatory wise, when there's a lot of areas that are under fire, gene and cell therapies are not. They're pretty well recognized as something that's necessary, and a meaningful step forward.
So which public companies should people be following? I know there's like Novartis, Bluebird, I
Yeah,
think Vertex. And can you also, because Vertex I thought was a CRISPR company. Can you just talk about the difference between CRISPR? I just want to understand that
yeah.
better. CRISPR and gene therapy.
Sure. And actually, let me finish on, we had mentioned manufacturing before, so let me just go through that quickly. Manufacturing is a massively key component to this. And again, to come back to Regenix, I've toured their manufacturing facility. It's kind of amazing. You're in a room that's not that big, and they're saying from this reactor right here, we can make enough to treat everybody we need to treat for a year. So,
Right.
but
Well, it's funny that because, one of the problems with the GLP-1s, Eli Lilly's stock, et cetera, is, you only need like a couple pounds of the base molecule for these GLP-1s. You could basically supply it to the entire United States for a couple years. Like, you
yeah,
don't need a
absolutely.
lot of this stuff.
And
Yeah.
gene therapy is even higher leverage because the little gene therapies you're making that go in your body then go make the beneficial protein.
Right.
So it's even more. But because it's so potent and it comes out of cells, you have to make these things out of cells. You have to be good at manufacturing. It has to come out very pure. Because if there's cellular debris, because again, you make the viruses in little cells and try to clean all the cell stuff off it so you have pure virus. If you have other cell stuff that comes in with it, that can cause immune reactions, and you don't want that. So,
Right.
that's why people dump, a lot of effort and money into building their manufacturing, and it's less important to scale it up to what you think of, smokestacks and all that. Like
Right.
it's pretty
Yeah.
compact. It has to be pretty perfect.
More of microbrewery rather
Yeah,
than
exactly.
large. Yeah, fine. So can talk about the public company landscape. Once again, we're
Yeah,
talking like Vertex and Bluebird and
yeah.
Sarepta, Vertex,
So I
Novartis.
guess starting at the largest and coming down. So I mean, Novartis, like I said, has Zolgensma, but they hardly talk about it in their earnings call. It's not a huge part of their revenue stream.
Do you know what indication they're going after?
Well, so Zolgensma, that's the one that's approved for spinal muscular atrophy.
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah,
But so and pharmas tend to play where they already understand the market. So I could see Novartis continuing to expand in gene therapy. But again, I don't know that that's an investable thesis just because of given everything else that's on Novartis. Regenix is, sub-billion-dollar market cap with several multi-billion-dollar potential products, well, at least two in late stage. Um, Their competitor Sarepta is one that you should know about. And just to get into the Regenexx program a bit, their lead program is in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. There's one gene therapy for that right now, marketed by Sarepta. They did 800 million in their first year on the market, and then a couple patient deaths popped up. So they've treated hundreds of kids, and I believe three. Don't quote me on that, but it's somewhere around that. Patients died. The FDA said pull it off the market. No, it's okay, you can do it. No, you have to pull it off. Did the hokey pokey there. And Sarepta actually, if you look at their stock over the past year, they've dropped from 73 to 22. They lost 5 billion in market cap just because of that in and out, the issue with their gene therapy. And by the way, that's a large part of the reason I like Regenexx, is because I think if their trials go well, they're probably the answer to that issue.
They'll slip into that market share,
Yeah,
so to speak. Yeah.
that's what I believe. Yeah. Another one to pay attention to, Uniqure, Uniqure. So they had probably the best gene therapy data set of the year so far. They're treating Huntington's disease, which is a disease that creeps in probably, I think, your 50s, and you just kind of, I wouldn't say slowly, it's pretty rapidly just kind of neurodegenerate.
Right.
But they showed earlier this year they slowed progression of Huntington's by 75% in 3 years.
Wow.
So that was a big
Yeah.
one. There's other ocular ones. So Opus Genetics is a small one that is doing eye diseases. I cover Crystal Therapeutics, which is using theirs for some skin diseases. They're trying it in cystic fibrosis. Some other eye ones, Adverum for DMT, are competitors on Regenexx's ocular program. And I know I mentioned before hemophilia. So BioMarin has one of those relatively disappointing gene therapy programs. So does CSL Behring. I mean, as you can tell, it's a laundry list, and it makes it fun for me. It's a stock picker's market. But I guess that's probably the highlights as far as I'm concerned.
And are they all using the same technology or variations on the same technology in regards to the same vector approach, or are
Mostly. Everyone tries to tweak it their own way. A lot of these, if not most of them, are based in AAV, because when you're an early biotech company, or a biotech company at all, you want to have as little clinical risk as possible. You want to be only treating, hopefully, or only testing, hopefully, one hypothesis. And you don't want one of those hypotheses to be, is my vector okay? So we know AAVs are good. And so people keep going back to that mostly.
and is that the one that Regenexx owns?
Uh, yeah, so they own patents on certain AAVs. And then of course biologics are complicated. So of course people will debate who owes who, what does a patent cover? Does this very similar vector fall under that patent? But yes, it's all pretty similar.
And is there a similarity in regards to just like pitfalls and common threads of failure
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so Uh, it comes back to the little history lesson and balancing safety and efficacy. So, a couple things, when you're running through clinical trials, first you have to prove that it's safe. And if you're developing something that's going into hundreds of patients and you give it to 20 patients and it's safe, you don't know yet whether or not it's safe in such a huge population, but you can get a sense around that. And then just efficacy, right? In Duchenne muscular dystrophy, the product that's on the market, they showed, that they can increase this gene that they're trying to pump in. But in terms of actual benefit in the kids, can you walk better? Can you stand up from a lying position better? It was less clear. So actually having clear efficacy on functional endpoints like that is crucial. And again, coming back to safety, right? If you think about the eyeball, right, you only need a little bit of tissue in the back of it to get treated to have a big effect. If you're treating a muscle wasting disease, you have to get a ton of virus to everyone's muscles. And like I said, your body knows how to recognize a virus. So If you put in too much, you can get immune reactions. You can get liver problems because your liver is highly involved in processing these external molecules. So it's a matter of mitigating those safety issues while also ramping up the efficacy. Um, and so the safety can come up at any point. Efficacy is proven in clinical trials. And then once we see those trials, it probably won't change up or down. Once it's approved and on the market, we kind of know what we're getting out of it. And the safety, you just have to continue to monitor while it's in development and on the market.
Are they all, just from an economic perspective, are they all kind of one-time cure pricing models?
Not all of them, many of them. So, for example, I cover Crystal, which doesn't use AAV; it uses HSV, and that one is intentionally designed to be retreatable. It's for a skin disease where your skin is just super fragile and will like rub off. It's bad. So, but you need to be able to reapply that. But for that, you use a different vector. If you have to retreat with the same AAV, your body, it's the same as vaccinating to some extent. Your body doesn't want to see the same thing again.
Right. And then is there like how are insurers then approaching reimbursement for these one times?
Yeah, they've been good. I think they recognize the fact that you're saving on lifelong treatment, and that this is an extremely helpful therapy.
And how are you looking at valuations in terms of, like is PE or price earning growth, is that even relevant here? How should an
So
investor think about valuations?
we live and die by the discounted cash flow model, which is there are a lot of assumptions that you can make a drug look really, really attractive or not. The easy way is a potential sales multiple for something that you give over and over and over, like a chemotherapy or something. I've heard three as a pretty quick and dirty way to get from sales to valuation. And then of course you have to probability adjust, which is where it gets really tricky. So if something's reading out a trial in next year and it could be $1 billion of recurring revenue, quick and dirty, you can say, okay, that's worth 3 billion. But okay, is it a 50% chance of working and then it's worth 1.5 billion, or is it a 10% chance of working, in which case it's worth 300 million? So it's all probability adjusted discounted cash flow models is with sales multiples as a dirty stand-in sometimes.
So what are the biggest headwinds in the industry right now in regards to cost, competition, like maybe from RNA or cell therapy?
Yeah. So I would say competition is fierce when one person decides that they're going to that when one person shows that this approach might work, like any given approach might work in a disease, you'll get all kinds of people saying, yeah, but ours is a little better. So, use ours. So then they start competing for patients in clinical trials. And it's just, if you can get through that jungle and make it to market as first, second, third on the market, then you're still preserved. Your market's usually still pretty well preserved. Um, it just a lot of it comes down to the trial and error of picking the right disease and the right gene. For example, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which again is Regenex's lead program. Um, that's been people have taken their lumps in that and had safety issues in clinical trials and didn't make it all the way to the market. As I said before, right, Sarepta's on the market and had their issues. So just getting your thing to work, it comes down to the science a lot of the time.
Right.
And then by the way, after that, there's no shortage of rare diseases. Um, it'll differ depending on organ system. So again, because of DMD, we know how to deliver to the muscles. We know how to deliver to the eye. So I don't know how
What
easy
about
it is to.
cancer?
So cancer is different because it's uh, so it's not as easy to treat with with one molecule. You can't kind of one time lifetime give this one therapy because the problem with cancer is it mutates so fast. So once you start suppressing it with one drug, it'll lose whatever that drug is targeting and just mutate to something else, and then you have to find another thing to target it with. So it's really, really I don't know if cancer will be treated in by gene therapy in my lifetime outside of specific small random indications that are well genetically defined.
Who's winning the global race? Europe, US, China? You know, what
Yeah,
about, yeah.
the innovation is still made in the USA, really. There's a handful of companies. So most biotech is done in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the Bay Area, California. Um, Maryland is where Genix is. Jim Wilson is in Philadelphia. So there's our academic institutions in our biotech world are still second to none. Europe is fast followers. They once something launches here, it pretty much launches there. They often negotiate to pay less and sometimes just refuse to pay. And on a country by country basis, sometimes they don't get certain things. But that hasn't hit on gene therapy yet. I think just going back to the payer issue that I said, it's still such a small portion of their overall expenditure.
What about next generation gene therapies? Are some close to market that could really meaningfully expand the category?
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny when you say next generation and then you say close to market because for us, next generation is the stuff still on the bench.
Fair enough.
Um, but no, I think coming to market again, this Regenx's next gen DMD program. They also have one for wet AMD, which was the ocular program that we mentioned before, where instead of getting 1 to 2 injection every month or two, you get one hopefully lifelong. This Unicure by Huntington's, Huntington's disease by Unicure. That's super exciting. Um, by the way, that ocular program from Regenix, they might also be able to tap into the market of diabetic retinopathy, which was it's a disease that people don't get treated because they will have to get it probably for a long time. They're already not great on their health and they don't have any visual problems yet, but they're coming. So using this one-time lifetime treatment potentially brings that market into play. So that's exciting and I think not well appreciated because that market doesn't make money right now because of the therapies don't really address it that well. Beyond that, people are trying all kinds of things in central nervous system, which is tough. I know Unicor is a central nervous system for Huntington's. People are trying, cystic fibrosis. That's tough to treat with anything, inhaled, but could happen. But in terms of actual next generation approaches, we mentioned CRISPR. So, and we pointed out before that the difference between CRISPR and gene therapy is gene therapy takes a whole gene, says, hey, here, make this. CRISPR takes a mutated gene, something that's somehow broken, and just tweaks the one thing that needs to be tweaked. It doesn't really add in a new gene. It fixes what's there. So there's a lot of excitement around that. CRISPR, Editas, uh, Beam are all doing similar things like that. But yeah, gene editing and gene therapy, I think at this point are viewed in the same basket.
Right. I was going to ask that. So if you're a family office, over the next 12, 24 months, what milestones should you be looking for that would point to, hey, this sector's really going to deliver?
Yeah, so I would say again, Unicure in Huntington's, see, there's so much positivity after that great readout. see if it makes it to market, goes through the FDA cleanly, and then is commercially successful. And speaking of being commercially successful, keep an eye on Sarepta's Elevidys, and that's such a good bellwether for how the FDA is going to approach anything, because again, it's still probably the positives outweigh the negatives, even though there's a safety risk, and if patients are well informed, then maybe they should be able to make the decision on their own. But that's a really good bellwether for regulatory attitudes. Hopefully Regenix comes and just takes the gives them the answer. Their ocular program is also big. I think Regenix's ocular program should, if that works, because it's also partnered with AbbVie, by the way, showing AbbVie has been in the ocular market for a while, and their interest is important, I think. But yeah, any success from that program, I think, would open up the eye to further advances for like rare diseases of blindness. So the funny thing is, like, and this is what makes my job so fun, is a year from now, something in gene therapy will have popped up, and everyone will know about it. And I've never heard of the company right now, but somebody's going to do something, cool. So
Yeah.
keep your eye out.
I mean, I find it like, I just find it so incredible that someone came up with this idea, perfected it in the lab, and yet it can be so revolutionary, in just treating all these diseases. It's just, I mean, it's a little bit like a very positive Frankenstein,
Yeah, yeah.
where,
A little bit, but no, I've definitely, over the course of, I guess, my schooling and work, kind of come to view DNA as part of your body and not the defining part of who you are. And I think that's kind of an important mental hurdle to get over if you ever are offered gene therapy.
right. Yeah, interesting. Last question for family offices. So how should they view this sector? Uh, should they view it in the framework of venture allocation, or is it, public market exposure, maybe
Yeah.
like thematic funds? Like, how should they be thinking about it?
Yeah, so there are thematic funds. Yeah, obviously, so the XBI is the small cap biotech index. If you want to get more specific to genomic medicines, so GNOM is an index that follows that. That'll have gene therapy and gene editing and some cell therapies. So, the more broad scope of what we've been talking about today. But it's still a stock picker's market. If you really want to get interested in it, follow a couple of the industry publications. So like Fierce Biotech is a great one. Endpoints News is a great one. So if you just kind of follow a handful of them and really kind of get deep into it and understand the competitive dynamic, I think that's the way to do it. But again, if you want broader exposure, I the genome index covers a lot of these stocks.
Okay. And what if we want to get your research?
I believe, yeah, just reach out. We'll put you on the distro.
Awesome. All right. There's some audience questions, so I want to give Callie an opportunity to get to those. Take it away, Cal.
Thank you so much. So Bill, some of these companies have focused on single disease programs, and others have a platform that can be applied across multiple indications. From an investor standpoint, which model offers better long-term upside?
Long-term upside, the platform, but initial ease to market and something to sink your teeth into, single product. So, if I'm looking at a preclinical company and they want to tell me about how great their pipeline is, your pipeline's only as good as your lead asset at that point. So tell me about your lead asset and the best thing that your pipeline has come up with. And if that's good, then there's pipeline value and read through.
Great, thank you. So how do the cells that have been impregnated with the changed gene propagate throughout the body and infuse all the cells?
Yeah, so right now that's limited to mostly, very small subsets of diseases. So, for example, sickle cell disease is in the stem cells in your blood. So what they do is they take the cells out, they add in the gene that they need, or rather correct the gene that they want. And then it's a really painful process. It's called lymphodepletion. They get rid of all your blood stem cells and infuse these new ones in. And not all blood, I guess white blood cell, all your immune cells, and infuse the new ones in. So those get adopted as the new stem cells.
Great, thank you. Among the established gene therapy companies, is there any one that is best positioned to scale clinically and commercially over the next few years?
Yeah, and I hope this doesn't sound like an ad for Regenix. I think the reason I'm talking here is because I'm in print with my price target on Regenix being well above where it is, but they're approaching the clinic. They do their manufacturing in-house. It's established. Regenix, I think stands out as very well prepared to me.
Thank you. Some of the major pharmaceutical companies increasingly partner with or acquire gene therapy developers. What does that tell you about where the industry is headed?
Yeah, so M&A tends to be very fashionable. And by that, I mean, 2 years ago, everyone wanted a radio pharma platform. And, once someone buys a gene therapy platform, other people buy gene therapy platforms. So if they're willing, pharma companies are very, they like what they like, and it's a huge energy barrier to step outside and learn something new. So once someone in-licenses a gene therapy platform, not just a program, then they're kind of committing to adding programs and the research happens in biotechs, the scale and the commercialization happens in pharma companies, essentially. Obviously, there's some crossover, but there's the Venn diagram is pretty tight. So yeah, it tells me that they're committing and that they see it as commercially viable.
Thank you. And how does the reimbursement landscape look for gene therapy?
Yeah, so far, I mean, I think we've probably addressed this a couple times, but I've seen no pushback. I've seen like people this of all the things of all the big pharma boogeymen, this is not one of them. This is something that keeps getting heralded and accepted by doctors, payers, patients. It's no issues on that front.
And the last question is, from an investor's perspective, what makes the gene therapy space attractive right now compared with other areas of biotech?
Yeah, so I guess to step back, right, 2022 was the heyday of the XBI. Everything was at a peak. And ever since then, kind of all the hype cycles faded, ton of things didn't work. And we're kind of at a nadir in terms of excitement on biotech right now. And to me, I think what's going to bring the excitement back to it is a couple success stories and a couple in terms of both treating patients, curing patients, and being commercially successful. And I think we're kind of on the verge of seeing a couple of these gene therapies not only make it to market, and I believe will be commercially successful, but also a lot of companies that are going to come into into like late stage clinical trials where people can get excited about the more near term opportunity. Where if you compare that to something like oncology, that's every one of those drugs is going to be a dogfight for a while. It's very busy and people kind of pile into similar mechanisms of action. Whereas gene therapies in each rare disease, it's a little more defined. It's a little bit of a smaller competitive landscape. The unmet need is huge. That's never going to go away from rare diseases. So yeah, gene therapies are both near term, fill an unmet need, and have no shortage of new things that they can go after.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you all for joining today. I just want to point out, if you have additional questions, please reach out to me. Everyone in the audience has my email address. I'm happy to facilitate an introduction to Regenix, as well as to Bill to get on his mailing list. And Bill, I want to thank you for joining us today and speaking on this great subject. And I
Thanks
think
for
we all
having me.
learned a lot. And I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you.